All right, this is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, back once again with my co-host Brian Solomon. How's it going?
Happy to be here as always, Al. Sorry to hear you're feeling kind of sick today.
Yeah, disclaimer right off the bat, I am a little under the weather, maybe a lot under the weather. So if I'm a little more low energy and grabbing for the tissues and congested than usual, my apologies, but I will power through. And if since you don't have one Alfonso at full strength, we got ourselves a second Alfonso here. Alfonso Lopez, PWI contributor, joining the show for the first time. How's it going?
Hi, thank you very much for having me. I'm so sorry to hear you're not feeling great, but we'll do the best we can, I guess.
Your condolences are appreciated. Yes, Alfonso is new to the magazine. Just got himself a column in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. He is sort of our new lucha guru. We're going to be talking a little lucha with him and covering several other topics as well. Since we last were here, we've had two PLEs, both AEW's Dynasty and Backlash over this weekend. Both really highly reviewed shows. Lots of good stuff on both of them. We'll go through some of it and the fallout of both, and talk the latest to AEW. We've got a location for WrestleMania now for next year. An interesting location and an interesting date. We'll talk about. And as I mentioned, since we have Alfonso here, we're going to talk a little AAA and maybe a little CMLL. I will admit to not being super up to speed, but that's why we have him here, and some tie-in with some of those subject matters and AEW for sure. So we'll get into all that in a moment. Real quick, tell you about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. We're probably due for another one soon. I have not seen the cover of the new one. Very excited, but this is honestly one of my favorites. What a great cover with Ali in the cover, and I think we've got a lot of good feedback about it. My interview with Mustafa Ali, is he still X Division champ? I mean, last I heard he was X Division champ.
He is
in TNA, and a lot more in this issue. Alfonso, you've got a feature in this issue, right?
Yeah, I believe so. The CMLL luchadors that appeared in AEW television. There's a little introduction to all six of the first luchadors who appeared. Some of them need no introduction, like Místico, maybe even Volador Jr. But yeah, I hope it helps catching people up to speed with people like Star Jr. and Esfinge, who are, pretty new to even Mexican audiences.
Yeah. What I mean, like, I remember when we first started seeing CML wrestlers appear on AEW, it really kind of opened a lot of eyes, in part because there was already the working relationship with AAA. So how big a deal was it that CML would not only work with AEW, but would work with a company that was already working with AAA?
Well, I think it was a pretty huge deal. But I think what it made it so huge, especially for us fans in Mexico, is how the luchadors were presented. Like, they were presented so differently from the AAA and pretty much from any other wrestler who had debuted in AEW. Like, the fact it was just like, here are four of our top guys, and pretty much immediate war, immediately attacking the top stars in AEW, and immediately talking about some of them possibly going to Arena Mexico. Like, it was such an immediate fire almost in Mexican wrestling media, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you covered it well. As I mentioned, your new column also debuts in the magazine El Tiburazon, right? Am I saying that right?
Tiburazon. You made me kind of lose it in my head. I kind of have it written down because Tirabuzon. I'm so sorry, Tirabuzon. It's like a vintage move. It's an abdominal stretch, very popular in Mexico in the 80s. But yeah, kind of like a tongue twister.
And what's sort of like your vision for the column in the magazine? What do you want to do with it?
Well, El Tirabuzon is basically, like I said, like an abdominal stretch, but kind of like twistier. So I like the idea of getting the ins and outs of Lucha Libre, in and out, I guess.
Yeah. I thought I read the column and an interesting take about how, in a way, AAA and CMLL have kind of reversed roles as of late, where CMLL for a long time was looked at as sort of like the more traditionalist wrestling company, AAA more on kind of the cutting edge. And more recently, you've seen, we could talk more about this, AAA kind of embracing more of the stars from the past, and CMLL kind of being at that cutting edge, the relationship with AEW. And meanwhile, you've got, Dolph Ziggler winning the world title in the a AAA. Dolph Ziggler versus Alberto in the main event of one of their biggest shows of the year. I saw that and I was like, what is this, like 2013 WWF? I literally saw, that match. I saw a world title change that match. You might have been at that Brian, the night after WrestleMania back in 2013.
I was not at that. No, I wasn't. I didn't. The only thing I did that year is I did the Hall of Fame at the Garden. Yeah.
So, Alfonso, what's behind that, and how do you think Mexican lucha fans are? You couldn't be, and I think Nick Nemeth is doing great work. I mean, in some ways, he's doing like the best work of his career, but he does represent something. And he's a WWE guy. He was in that company for 20 years. And now, not cut from the same cloth of the last several mega champions. I think it's fair to say. What do you think of him in that position, and how do you think he's being received?
Well, it's definitely an interesting choice by AAA. I think, like, I personally, not having any insider knowledge, it kind of feels like Alberto Del Rio is getting like a little, I don't know if influence is the right word, but it definitely feels like he's gonna be like more involved with AAA going forward. He definitely feels like he's trying to be presented as like the figurehead, as like the top guy. So I think Nick Nemeth being the world champion has a lot to do with that. I think his relationship with Alberto definitely helped in making him world champion. And I also think AAA kind of realizes that CMLL is in such a strong point right now, probably the strongest they've been in, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years, probably more. So I feel like AAA is trying to throw things at the wall and see what sticks, like bringing back Jeff Jarrett again after, well, I don't know how well known his troubles with Mexico were, but he wasn't very well liked a few years ago. Also, the whole Orígenes Retro tour also kind of feels like AAA trying to come up with things, not really having like like a concrete direction, but bringing in guys, and they also are trying to do like this like kind of Bray Wyatt teasers, like an eye is showing up on the screens and there's a little interference with, like, you can't really see where AAA is going, but you can definitely see that they're trying new things. They're trying as much as they can. Also, the fact that so many wrestlers left, I think is really hurting them. Like the fact that Triple Mania just came and went, and there was no Lucha Brothers, no Commander, no LA Park, no Blue Demon. Like, I believe it was Latin Lover who said it in one of his recent podcasts, that a lot of people don't want to work with Conan right now. And apparently that is the case for some of these guys like Blue Demon and LA Park. So yeah, it definitely feels like AAA is trying to gain interest in any way they can. Like, and Nick Nemeth feels like kind of like a token, kind of like a way of bringing in more foreigners, more TNA wrestlers. Like kind of like see how we're treating foreign stars right now. Try to come, try to strengthen their alliance with TNA. I think that's their best shot at the moment.
Yeah. A company struggling for relevancy, bringing in a lot of old stars, heel authority figure. Why does this sound familiar? I think this is going to come up later in the conversation.
It's a AAA formula.
Yeah, no, and it's fascinating stuff. Brian, while we're on the topic, what do you think of, Nick Nemeth, Dolph Ziggler 2.0, whatever? I mean, over just the weekend, I think he was working in Japan for the global title, which he had, but I think dropped over the weekend. It's been headlining TNA shows. Now the champ in AAA. You see this often when a guy leaves WWE, and there is a thought that he was undervalued there, but there can be a temptation maybe to overcorrect maybe and push a guy not beyond his ability, but beyond sort of like, I don't know, the tolerance of fans. What do you think of this sort of like international push that Nick Nemeth is getting?
Well, I just think it's great that people like him can reliably continue to make a living after WWE. Like, I like the idea that, there's not just one place where you can work, or even two where you could make a really good living, and more than that as a pro wrestler. Like, you can make your name in WWE, and then that becomes valuable elsewhere. We've seen tons of people do that. I mean, Cody did that. He's probably the greatest example ever, or the most famous recent one. And where you can say, okay, they let me go, but my life isn't over. My career isn't over. I'm still valuable. And the fact that there's a wrestling landscape now that's robust enough to do that is, I think, the best thing for wrestlers in the business. So, I mean, obviously Dolph Ziggler was in WWE for so long, I think, that he just kind of, his time passed there. There's only so much you can do with the guy, and they had overexposed him and everything. And I think sometimes people look at a wrestler a certain way because of that. And then when they get out of that umbrella, it's like they're refreshed again, and they're able to, I guess, trade on their name, which, I think is great. Good for them. That's how it should be. There should be more opportunities like that. It helps them with bargaining too, where we see some people like, Matt Cardona, who basically is like, and I don't know if this is really true or not, is like, I'm not even sure I would go back if they wanted me back, because he's doing phenomenally. He's charting his own course. He's naming his price. He's going wherever he goes. He's the hottest indie wrestler in the business, and has been for a couple of years. I mean, like, that's how it should be. I like that.
And I think a key to both those guys, and a third guy I'll mention, our cover boy here, Mustafa Ali.
Another good one, yes.
It is not settling down, right? So I think, any one of those guys could have been tempting to go and sign the contract in AEW, but we've seen that that's not necessarily the best move for people, especially a landscape as crowded as AEW, where a Nemeth or a Mustafa or a Matt Cardona, again, they can call their shots. They can work all over the place. They're in demand all over the place. Everybody wants to put their world title on them. And it's the kind of thing, likening it to Cody to some extent, that, I wouldn't be surprised. And a lot of things have to go right, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Ziggler back in WWE, 3 to 5 years from now, demanding a lot more money, potentially with a lot higher place in the card. He's not a young man anymore, so I think there's like a limit to how much you can do with that. But it is that, that's what we saw with Drew McIntyre years ago. So I think all these guys, and maybe Nemeth in particular, are really playing it smart. And whether it's good for AAA or not, it's like, hey, you want to put your world title on me? By all means, and he's doing really good work. So I'm glad to see it. Anyhow, I'll read Alfonso's feature on the CMLL talents in AEW and his new column in the latest Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Pick it up at PWI-online.com. Subscribe while you're there. You can subscribe to the print edition, the digital edition. There are bundles where you can get both. We've got a lot more back issues that we have unearthed that you can pick up, and these are pristine mint classic issues. Some of them go back decades, and your one-stop shop for all of them is PWI-online.com. So let's jump right back into current events. the most current of which Backlash over the weekend. From a news perspective, not the most newsworthy show, nor did we expect it to be. I mean, this very much felt like getting Cody his first a win under his belt, giving him a good match. He had a really good match with AJ, really one of WWE's better matches of the year. We had Tangaloa join Tama Tonga. We've got the Guerrillas of Destiny now reunited in WWE. So from a newsworthy standpoint, that's probably the biggest thing. New women's tag team champions. But really, I think the story coming out of Backlash was that crowd and just how electric they were. Maybe the hottest WWE crowd I've ever seen, which is saying a lot. And I feel like I've said that a lot over the last couple of years. I think the two hottest crowds I can remember in recent history were the last two Backlashes out of all things, last year in Puerto Rico and this year in France. Alfonso, did you see the show?
Yeah, definitely.
What did you think of that crowd? And I wonder, is it possible? This sounds counterintuitive for a crowd to be too hot. They almost become like a distraction. And I just mentioned, when Ziggler beat Alberto El Patron 11 years, it was the night after Raw. And this is when those Raw, the Raw after WrestleMania, that is. And that's when those Raw after WrestleManias would get so rambunctious that it was like a bit much, right? And it was like people with the beach balls, and they would just kind of like hijack the shows. And this felt almost like that. It was like it almost became like a parody of itself. It's like, all right, settle down, everyone, and let's watch this match. So what did you think of the crowd?
Well, I saw a comment online that said this just goes to show how much international crowds were kind of like starved of WWE's product for so many years, and the fact that WWE is at such a high point right now, I think it just creates the perfect storm for these international crowds, that they know it's not just a house show, it's like a live tour. Like, what they say matters. And I also think that they know there's a chance they might not get another PLE in a year or 5 years or 10 years again.
They're sort of making their case. I had the same idea. It's like they're not just reacting. It's like they're really looking to make a statement. And I know there was a lot of discussion of the stadium that is across the street from that arena. And I think Triple H even mentioned in the press conference that Nick Khan texted him during the show just the word stadium ? And so, yeah, I guess that's the other part of it, Brian, beyond just like them being real excited. It feels like they're trying to make their case.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see more of this in the future. I think under the new regime here, I think
that's right. They've said all international pay-per-views outside of the big four.
Yeah, because it's been working. I mean, there's a whole untapped market out there. And I guess it's one of those things where for so many years we've seen it in production, we've seen it in creative, TV, all that kind of stuff, where they were set in their ways for a very long time. This is how we do things, and that's it. That's the way it's done. And I think part of that is like, yeah, it's a pain in the ass. I don't know if I could say that on here. It's a pain in the butt to be going overseas all the time. It is. If you're in production, if you're talent, I mean, yeah, it's a pain. But they're pushing people to do more and to do things differently than they used to do. And I think you're going to see that. It's funny to me because, it makes sense because you're trying to push this thing as a global brand, right? As a global product. It has the word world in the name, World Wrestling Entertainment, or, I remember it as we've come a long way when I'm a fan as a kid and I'm watching it. And the idea of it being a global product is that you have Killer Khan and Kamala there. And I'm going, oh, there's a guy from Mongolia. Oh, there's a guy from Africa. Everybody else is from America. Okay, it's the World Wrestling Federation. Great. So they're really trying to, live up to their name. I mean, I think it's cool. But I'm here in my comfy home, not having to go on the road. As a fan, yeah, it seems cool. I'm sure there's probably some grumbling within. Especially on some of the TV production side of things. I know those guys and how hard that job is, but I think it just strengthens the brand for them to do it, and they'd be dumb not to go to these markets that really, really want them really badly I think sometimes though it's a little unrealistic by, it's a big world out there and there's a lot of places to hit. So when you see something like they just had this huge show in France, and then immediately at the press conference, everybody's like, so when are you coming back to France? When's the next show going to be? And it's like, all right, calm down, guys. We were just here. It's a big world. There's a lot of countries to go to. This isn't France Wrestling Entertainment. It's World Wrestling Entertainment.
But
no,
optics wise, that looks great, right?
It does, yes.
They're like, oh, please come back right away. And even, I mean, the other part of the discussion here was the announcement of WrestleMania being in Vegas. And then the stories that subsequently came out with that was the disappointment out of Minnesota, right? Like, oh, we were really this all looks really great for WWE, that like, not only do you have, cities really excited about getting your product, but you have ones that are really disappointed when they don't. And then like the message is like, we'll take whatever. Maybe you could bring another show here. Can we maybe get the Royal Rumble or something? And there was a story like that not long ago, I think out of Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh, I think, was making, is that right? I forget what the city was. They were making their case for some show. They were pleading for whatever. Bring a Royal Rumble here. Bring whatever. So it really is like the landscape now really is such that like everybody's sort of pleading to have WWE. It's a great look for them for sure. Again, as far as the crowd though, and the shorthand of it was super hot crowd, and it was. But it also was kind of a weird crowd, right? And I think it's when you kind of get into like that soccer culture, right? Where it's like less about even what's happening in the ring and more just like, let's put on a show. Right?
Well, that's my thing. Like the I think the difference is where it crosses the line, and I think this did, not to be a wet blanket, is the crowd that just is trying to get itself over.
Yep.
There's a difference between reacting to everything that's happening, and they did that, and just, we want to be a character on the show. The crowd is a character. And that can become a little obnoxious because it throws things off. I think some of the promos, they were really thrown off. I think part of that problem too is they didn't, the language barrier. Like, what the hell are these people saying? While I'm trying, how do I respond to this? I don't know what they're saying. Is this good? Is it bad? I don't know. I think that's part of it. I don't know. I don't mean to sound like a grump. It definitely is exciting, and you want crowds to get into the show. Some of those jaded North American, particularly United States audiences, it's just like, did they distribute Thorazine on the way in before the show started? Like, what's happening here? So I mean, I'll take that. I'll take this France crowd over that, certainly. But 3 hours of hearing the same exact thing every time somebody gets a 2 count, gets a little annoying.
It made for a good TV as kind of a one-off. Yeah, you wouldn't want it forever. But you know what? I think back to those old Coliseum videos from 30 plus years ago, where every once in a while they would do like European tour. And even then there was some of this, they would a lot with like the air horns and these kind of like sing-song chants. And I don't know what the hell they're saying.
Yeah, those vuvuzelas, right? Those like those soccer things.
Right.
Yeah, I think they started banning stuff like that actually.
So it's a cultural thing, but I mean, again, it made for great TV when you see the hard camera trembling, and
because I remember that happening it was a really big deal. It was that that Canadian In Your House they did, the one where it was the whole Hart family was in the ring, and the ring, the camera, hard camera was shaking. That's when you've got a loud crowd.
And they did pop at the right places, and they were reacting to all this stuff, just all the extra stuff. But it was absolutely a super hot crowd who was popping for the right stuff, and made what would have just been an ordinary but very good show, because everything was pretty good on it. But it was 3 hours. Again, there's nothing earth-shattering that came out of it. Really made it something special, that international audience. Let's talk about the other bit of news that came out of that, the announcement of WrestleMania being in Las Vegas. By many accounts, Minnesota was all but a done deal. I think the governor all but announced it. I think at some, he made some remarks some weeks ago when he kind of was talking about what Minnesota has to look forward to in 2025, and he said WrestleMania. So I think this was penciled in, and they pivoted. So that's not the only change. The other change is they're moving it later into April. We heard some discussion of that because they didn't want to go up against the Final Four NCAA college tournament, but moving it on to Easter, which I don't think they've ever done. And it makes sense. It's always been that they have kind of intentionally avoided it. So I guess for them, it was the call of it's fascinating, even from just as a sort of like societal standpoint of like where religion is in the United States, that if
it's not even just religion,
it's Easter, you go with Easter.
Right. It's not, but it's more than just religion. It's a big family holiday. I mean, it'd be one thing if they had it on, the Immaculate Conception. Okay, that I can understand.
But the biggest holiday
right. It's the biggest holiday in the Christian calendar. And not only that, but think about Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving is not a religious holiday, but the Survivor Series on those dates, they finally realized, like, hey, we can get a lot more people to watch this thing if it wasn't on Thanksgiving, Yeah. And I know that, in some wrestling cultures, there was the tradition of the big shows on holidays. That's never been WWE style of doing it. And it's a first time, certainly having it on Easter. I'm glad it won't be on my son's birthday weekend, but for once. But I will not be watching day 2. I mean, family comes first. I'm going to have my whole family over for Easter. I'm not going to be like, hey, guys, I got to go in the other room and watch WrestleMania. I'm sorry. That's a deal breaker for me.
I'm the opposite. We booked the hotel, and we've said, all right, I guess we're not doing Easter this year. Or the thought is, I think we're going to like do something the week before, right? So get the family over, have like.
That's Palm Sunday.
Yes, we're going to have, I guess we're going to create a new tradition of Palm Sunday dinners. But I think a lot of, I don't know how much of the thing is, right, when demand is so high on WWE and internationally, right? I mean, these aren't just American fans, and I don't even know if half the people are American, probably, but they talk about people coming from 50 countries or whatever all over the world. Even if this disqualifies a fairly big portion of those fans that need to be home with their families. Will there be enough demand? That I think there will, right? I mean,
I think there will. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, it's a huge crowd that they get there, but it's still like 70,000 people. I think you could find 70,000 people that are not going to be celebrating Easter. That's fine, or not doing it on that day. And I mean, I want to be clear because, like a lot of people have said, there is plenty of sporting events on holidays. I mean, there's huge football games on Thanksgiving, and the NBA, has had games on Easter Sunday and things like that, and lots of other things. It's just that WWE and even other wrestling companies have done huge holiday shows. Like I said, it's just that traditionally this was never a WWE thing. Like, this isn't how they train their fans. They would always kind of do these acrobatics to avoid having to do this. And I remember as a kid, it was like I was so happy when they moved Survivor Series off Thanksgiving, because I just flat out was not allowed to watch it. They would be like, what are you talking about? You're not watching wrestling. It's Thanksgiving. Like, just shut up. It's Thanksgiving, So, I was glad, but I don't know. I think they will do absolutely fine. But from a personal standpoint, it's definitely disappointing because I'm not going to be watching that second night live. I'll watch it on the network the next morning or whatever, but I just can't do it. There's too much going on.
Well, and this also kind of goes back to the international discussion is the new model for PLEs on Peacock, and maybe this eventually moves over to Netflix or something, allows for this in a way that they never did, because it sort of doesn't matter that much if you're watching live, right? I mean, you watch it when you want to watch it. That was one reason for so long they stayed away from these international markets, was because of the time zone, and a Backlash started at 1:00, I think. A couple months ago, Elimination Chamber started at 6 a.m., something like that, right? I mean, this would have been unthinkable once upon a time. Now it kind of doesn't matter, right? You subscribe to your Peacock, WWE gets your money, watch it when you want to watch it. I imagine a lot of people, I don't know if the majority, but I imagine a big fraction of viewers of Backlash over the weekend watched it at their leisure, Saturday evening or whatever. I saw on social media a lot of people not aware that it was earlier, and so just watching it later, which is fine. And kind of the same goes for WrestleMania. It's like, all right, watch it live, don't watch it live. It kind of
the only situation that hurts is for people that get together as a group to watch. You know what I mean? Like a viewing party, especially for WrestleMania. A lot of people do that. I do that. And you're not going to want to have a viewing party at 6 a.m. You know what I mean? Like that's the only thing, but that's not going to be what dictates their decisions, obviously, moving forward on this, when most people are probably watching it on the toilet on their phone. You know what I mean?
Crazy. Yeah. Alfonso, what do you think about Vegas as a location for WrestleMania? It has been 31 years since infamously bad WrestleMania 9 at Caesar's Palace. But now you've got this synergy with UFC based in Las Vegas, a big, beautiful stadium near the Strip. This sounds kind of like exactly what the new era WWE looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, I think it's great optics for the company. Not only like the huge city of Vegas, but the synergy with UFC, I think is gonna really help. Also, what you were mentioning, the fact that you have cities competing, like the fact that it's public knowledge that Minnesota was, well, people are saying they got screwed, but there may be more than that. Also, I've seen online the comment that this will probably be the most expensive WrestleMania of all time. I think that's also like an important piece of the puzzle. The fact that WWE is announcing these record-breaking crowds and record-breaking gates and stuff, but this WrestleMania in particular will probably be the most expensive of all time, considering even like how much more expensive a flight is going to be on Easter weekend. But yeah, like optic wise, it's great. It's fantastic for WrestleMania to be back in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I wonder if and even up until Saturday, there was part of me that just wasn't buying that WWE would put WrestleMania in Minnesota. And it's not a slight against Minnesota, but clearly, the you talk about the optics, they want to present as big city, big money, LA, New York, even Philly, would be at the bottom of what I think they would look at. But Tampa, Orlando, again, like the big tourist destinations. And Minnesota just didn't feel like, it fit in there. And I do wonder going forward, I mean, is it, are we just going to cycle through LA, New York, Vegas, Tampa, Orlando, something like that? And maybe Philly breaks in there. A Chicago, I guess you could do something like a big city like that. But it really does feel like, we are only, A markets going forward.
Well, I don't know if you saw this, but Jesse the Body Ventura was on some random like political podcast, and he just dropped this nugget saying that he didn't say Vince's name outright, but what he intimated was that now that Vince is gone, he's willing to talk to WWE again, and that he had been talking to them now about doing something. I saw that and I immediately thought it had to do with WrestleMania in Minneapolis, and he was probably trying to help get it to come there. I that was never confirmed, but that seems so obvious to me. The guy hasn't mentioned a word about doing anything with WWE until now, and I feel like that must have been a part of it. Like maybe they had reached out to him or he had reached out to them and said, hey, this is a good idea. And obviously that didn't work out.
Yeah, I'd love to see the Body back the microphone.
Me too. I was thinking about it because they were saying, it was really getting people's hopes up, and it might still happen that he does something. But, of all those classic announcers from that era, he's the only one left. I mean, Vince is left, but he's not doing it.
I was just thinking that, like, who could you? I mean, you've got like Shivani over.
Yeah, he was a blip on the radar of.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like he really, you don't have like that ready-made partner for him, but just to hear his voice, even if I can't imagine he's that familiar with the product. But Yeah. As far as this whole international discussion, Alfonso, down in Latin America, I think they're coming to Mexico in July, right? I might actually be in Mexico when
hey.
not like they're coming through Mexico City. You know, what's the demand down there, and you know, have you heard anything about any PLEs down there?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think the demand is great. It's huge. Basically, any show WWE puts on Mexican territory, basically any city, any stadium is probably gonna get sold out. And Rey Mysterio during WrestleMania week basically said he was trying to get a PLE to Mexico City. It kind of felt more like a crowd pleasing comment, not really like serious talks. But yeah, I would imagine Mexico is on WWE's list of international expansion. I've heard a lot about WWE not being happy with how much knockoff merchandise we produce, because yeah, that's a real concern. Mexico really produces a lot of knockoff merch. um, Even more so recently, like some artists, some like singers and stuff have come and they post on their Instagram stories how their face is on like religious characters or political characters. Like nothing is too much for Mexican knockoff merchandise, and apparently that is one of the things that's stopping WWE. I've also heard we've already talked about the crowds making the shows for themselves, and I've heard that's also one of WWE's concerns, since Mexico has a history of let's just say a little offensive chants. Yeah. So apparently WWE is worried about what the crowds might like, what the signs may say, what the crowd may chant. So yeah, those are two real big concerns for WWE in Mexico.
As long as you've got Rey Mysterio on the roster and he is relatively healthy and over, it seems like a wasted opportunity if you don't go into Mexico for a PLE with Rey headlining, challenging. Imagine, Rey versus Cody, even on an off month like a Backlash or something like that in Mexico City. I mean, that would be just huge business.
Yeah, I agree. Back when Brock was champion, they immediately ran Brock versus Rey for the championship with like no backstory, no literally nothing, and yeah, it was a complete sold out. It was it was craziness. It was Rey Mysterio country basically.
I think they did it with Rey and Roman Reigns, didn't they? Also.
Oh yeah, they also did it. Yeah. So Rey basically he has competed for the title every time WWE comes to Mexico.
Yeah, the thing is they got to keep on beating him, which I'm sure fans there don't love.
Yeah.
O'Brien, kind of like the high point of all this that they've been teasing, and even right through the weekend, and at the press conference, Triple H has teased is WrestleMania. WrestleMania specifically in England, and we saw John Cena on WWE television at a pay-per-view some months ago make the case for it. And again, I think there was a candidate, was it in England, who mentioned something about bringing WrestleMania to England, and
the mayor of London, I think,
was that it? Yeah, and Triple H said, "Let's talk," and then I guess he won the re-election, and he had reiterated that. Do you see that as potentially on the table?
Oh yeah, I would say for sure. I see Alfonso is shaking his head. Maybe he knows something I don't know, but I feel like, I mean, we all know that country is the one internationally that has the longest history with WWE, especially outside of North America. I mean, they've been going there since the late 80s. I mean, they've been going to France since the late 80s too, but I mean, they've had huge success there. SummerSlam, as we know, back in the day, one of the most legendary pay-per-views ever. They've done, international pay-per-views there just for the UK back in the day too. And so, I mean, I would think that would be a no-brainer. No, I mean, am I wrong on that?
And maybe All In gives a little
Right.
more
It's
incentive.
like we're gonna top you. I mean, that's good. I know what they're thinking. It's like if we could put one more person in Wembley Stadium than they did, it is worth everything to go.
It's just
there.
gonna be a ring and zero production.
Right.
So you put every
We're
last.
gonna add levels to the stadium, like build them out. Yeah.
Yeah. Alfonso, I mean, do you think that that's possible or even likely in the next 5 years?
Well, I don't really see WrestleMania leaving the States.
Really?
I do think like a Survivor, not even Survivor Series, a SummerSlam or a Royal Rumble would be huge. It would be the biggest thing to hit the UK since SummerSlam '93. But yeah, I don't really see WrestleMania in London. I think the Royal Rumble is a great opportunity for a UK pay-per-view. I think it's a better opportunity for WWE than to move WrestleMania all the way down to the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I think like again, sort of counterintuitive, but if you did WrestleMania, and I might be completely wrong about this, but if you did WrestleMania in London or somewhere in England, I wonder if you limit the international interest. So I think you'd pack the place with folks from the locals essentially, but would you get that people from all over the world as you get for WrestleMania in the States? When I was in Philadelphia a few weeks ago, first stop, of course, was get a cheesesteak. I left my credit card at the counter, and the guy who brings it up to me is from Australia. And it's like the first person I meet in Philadelphia. And it really is like almost, more than half, maybe 2/3 of the people you meet in and around, WrestleMania's location are not from that location. They're from all over the country and all over the world, all the different accents and all that. And I don't know how much of that you would get if you did it in England.
Well, I think you would get like
Are people all over the world to go to England for WrestleMania?
yeah, exactly. I think like every single like connecting country, because apparently it's not that it's not the hardest thing in the world to get from France to the UK or from Spain to the UK. So I think you would definitely get like those types of communities, let's say.
Who's American? I guess that would be the issue. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No Americans, basically no Canadians, no Latin American representation. But yeah, I think it'd be probably 75% locals, I'd say.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with my family because again, we're going almost every year, and I think that's a deal breaker for us. I mean, if they're in England, we're not pulling the kids out of school to go to England for a weekend, So, and I imagine a lot of people are in that situation. So, we'll see. Let's switch over to AEW. They had their own pay-per-view a few weeks ago. Dynasty. A lot of news out of that one too, with Swerve finally winning the world title, and I think even the bigger headline was Bryan Danielson and Will Ospreay's match. I think Meltzer gave it 6.5 stars. I think it's the highest rated American match ever by the Observer. People talking about the greatest match in U.S. history. So we could talk, my thoughts exactly, Brian. So all kind of part of the discussion of Ospreay and AEW, the presentation, and just sort of AEW's general philosophy. First, let me just ask you, was that the greatest match in American soil ever?
No. Okay, so I can add more to that, but I just, when it comes to questions like that, I never ever call anything that, because it just seems like what does that even mean, really? Because first of all, you can say it was my favorite match, you can say it was the best this, the best that, but have you seen every wrestling match that's ever happened? Like, have you? And how do you even compare from different eras? Like, what does that even really mean, honestly? What's the metric? Like, it was a relatively cold match that the only angle going in was like, hey, I'd really like to wrestle you because you're really good and I want to see if I could beat you. Like, that was the whole
the AEW playbook these days.
Even because people talked about Cody and AJ Styles and they were like, well, what about this is just two great wrestlers having a great match. Yeah, but I get that it wasn't the elaborate program that he had with the Bloodline. but they did make an effort to say, like, here's our, like, we've both been NWA champion. We both made our names outside. We had to do it outside WWE and then come here. We just missed each other. You know, he showed up at the Royal Rumble. That was the only time they were ever in the ring together. You know, was AJ's first match at the Royal Rumble. Like, they did those packages and things. So, I mean, like, do you care about things like that? Is it just bell to bell? So what I'm trying to say is, it's such an impossible thing to even say. And especially right after the match happened. I don't know why people jump to that. I love Dave Meltzer in The Observer. I defend him against all comers that try to, you know, trash him. I wish he'd be on Twitter less. But the star rating thing is so problematic to me, because it's like, you know, people rightfully point out, well, okay, I don't think Kurt Angle ever got a 5-star match, or I don't think there's been like 2 5-star matches in the history of WWE, or something crazy like that. It doesn't always make sense when you look at, well, this match got this amount, this match got that amount, not to mention the fact that I don't think he ever should have gone above 5 stars, because that opens the door of just, I think, didn't he give a match like 8 stars once or something like that?
I think he's got above 7. I think it's one of I'm pretty sure.
Well, Okada and Omega was the highest, right? I think one of those. So I mean, you know, it's so weirdly inflated. And one of the things that I love about him is that he has such a great historical perspective. He's the greatest for that. So I sometimes get a little disappointed when he says things like, you know, no match from back then would ever hold up. Flair and Steamboat isn't as great as you think it is. And, you know, these guys, you know, the matches today are always better. Everything's always better now. And somebody that knows that much about wrestling history should know better than that to say, in my humble opinion. So that's my long-winded way of saying, no, I don't think it was the greatest match in the history of United States wrestling, or whatever the heck. I don't even know if I'd call it the greatest match I've seen this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, straight up, I would put Cody and Roman over it, just because of, and I, you know, not so delusional to think that they put on a better match bell to bell, but the stakes, right? The stakes, the setting, the story, all of it, and I think, similar to you, it's not necessarily a slight on Dave Meltzer, but it is. It's not even a flaw in his system, but you have to recognize how the system works, that he really is measuring bell to bell, you know, and the content of that match. And I always bring up that he gave a 5-star match to, I forget what it was. It was, I don't even remember the guy's name anymore. A Ring of Honor a match some years ago, that was just a cold match, like in a gym in Florida or something.
Right.
But was fantastic, bell to bell. But come on, Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25 didn't get 5 stars.
Well,
it's insane. But I also, I get it. He's only measuring bell to bell, and that's fine. That is a way of doing it. But I think when you look at pro wrestling and the way pro wrestling works, it is all about the stakes. It is all about, in some ways, the most important part of a match happens before, you know, the match even comes into the ring. And I think that's the case for Cody and Roman, and that whole weekend that they spent years telling that story. So, you know, that match was the culmination of something, rather than, let's just see how good it's the difference between, I'm a huge Bon Jovi fan, and they just put out this a 4-part documentary, which is a blast to watch. And, you know, you appreciate that seeing Bon Jovi live in a stadium or Madison Square Garden now, or even in the last several years, is not the same experience as it was in the 80s, because they're older, his voice is shot, the energy level. But you're seeing Bon Jovi, the Rolling Stones are going back on tour, I think this month or next month. Rolling Stones in MetLife Stadium is such an experience, versus, you know, American Idol, you know, a girl from a local town who's got the greatest voice you've ever heard. I mean, the voice of an angel, you know. So are you going to give her 5 stars, and you're going to give the Stones or Bon Jovi 2 stars? It is the context of it, and it is not a criticism of Danielson or Ospreay But it may be, I don't know if it's a criticism of AEW, but I do think it is an indictment on the AEW's product and some of the challenges that they're facing, is that they put everything into work rate, match quality, and I think sometimes don't see the forest for the trees.
Well, it's like it's the rating of a performance is what it is, which is fine because that's what it's always been. It's like holding 10 out of 10 for the dive or in the Olympics. That's what it is. I still don't even know how consistent that's been over the years, because when you talk about the fact that now it seems like every other week there's a 5, 6, 7-star match, and there never used to be. So, I mean, there were plenty of incredible matches all through the 80s, 90s, 2000s that he's been doing it. So that's a little weird, but it's also it's just the plain old separation of different kinds of wrestling fans. And it's different ways of looking at it, because there are plenty of people who would explode at the thought of you saying that Cody versus Roman was a better match, because it was constant interference. It was all kinds of gimmickry inserted in. It was the Undertaker showing up, the lights going off. And there are people who hate that kind of crap, who'd be like, this isn't what I want to see. It was just constant interference. I think those are more of kind of like the hardcore work rate fans. I think there are far more people, and I mean demographics prove it in numbers, who would consider Cody and Roman to be a match they'd much rather watch than Ospreay and Danielson. And that's just the two, different kinds of wrestling fans that are watching it for different reasons, I think, that are just not going to see eye to eye on things like that.
It was a great match. I mean, none of
it
this
was. I don't want to take away from it. It was a great match,
yeah,
but
really
but it's almost like they dumped on it by giving it all these overinflated accolades. It was almost like, okay, calm down. It's like when a great movie comes out and you love the movie and everybody's like, it's the greatest movie ever made of all time. It's like, take it down a few notches. It was really good. It was maybe the best movie of the year, maybe. Not of all time. Come on, guys. Like, watch more movies,
Alfonso, did you watch that match?
Yeah. It was fantastic.
Is it the greatest match in the history? Better than Randy Orton's Edge in 2020?
I don't think so, but I'm sure a lot of people will say this. Will defend this match. To the grave, basically.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of it. The other thing, and again, I mean, like I said, the big headline was Swerve winning. We could talk a bit about more of that, but I did want to spend some time talking about kind of the fallout, the show after that, and just kind of a state of AEW, because we've talked a little bit about this. A company is as successful or as good or as bad as what they are showcasing, right? Their top angle, their top star. And right now, a huge amount of TV time is being put into the EVPs and the storyline with Tony Khan and all the stuff, and Jungle Boy back returning at Dynasty, Jack Perry. This is their new big angle. This is what they are banking on, moving the needle. I've got to say, and I'm trying to be diplomatic. I know sometimes we could be pretty negative here about AEW. That angle, and they've gotten a lot of flack, I think rightfully so, with Tony Khan and the EVPs, and Okada and Jungle Boy attacking Tony Khan. I won't go as far as Eric Bischoff calling it, the worst thing he's seen on 30 years. It was bad. It was really bad. It was. What do the kids say? Cringe. It was embarrassing. It was hard to watch. I'll say they recovered some the following week. The angle with Kenny Omega, I liked a lot. I thought that was really well done. But generally, I'm just not feeling these EVPs. I think it is bad television. I think it's a bad act. I think it is go away heat for the Bucks, who on their best day had some go away heat, and now I feel like they're kind of like turning the volume up on the go away heat all the way. And I get, in as much as they're heels, you could say that's the point, but it just all feels very, I don't know. It feels somewhat like they're trying to be WWE, and and missing by a lot. But it's all to say I don't like it. I think it's terrible. I thought Tony taking that bump and the neck brace, it was just all laughably, embarrassingly bad.
Well, I'll try to be more positive. I really mean this because, yeah, I mean, the execution of that was not great. One thing that I see what they're trying to do, and I can't fault them for it, is they're trying to lean into some of the heat that they have got on themselves, maybe for the heat they've gotten for bad reasons, and maybe trying to do something positive with it. Like, they know that the Bucks are hated by a lot of people because of the fallout with CM Punk, and there are a lot of people who are on Punk's side or who blame guys like the Bucks and Page for why and Jungle Boy for why Punk isn't there anymore. And so they're trying to lean into that, right? I mean, I could see the instinct of wanting to do that. Hey, we could use this. And I have to say, when Jack Perry showed up, when he was in New Japan, and then when he first came back to AEW and all that, I thought the reveal of him was tremendous when they pulled that mask off and he had that eating grin on his face. I just thought, like, that is so perfect. That what a guy, what a heel, God. But I could see how they're going, oh my God, this guy has actual genuine heel heat. Like, there's some like energy. You know what I mean? Like, that's hard to generate today, where it's not just this ironic thing. Like, you don't even get that most of the time with MJF, where it's like people are just laughing along with him. But this real, I think they probably felt like, wow, there's like something around this guy. Like, people have real emotions. They hate him or they like what he did. Like, there's something. Maybe we could tap into it. I like that. It's just my fear from the beginning, and it maybe is coming true, was like, okay, the track record is, can they actually capitalize it? They've been given, I really do feel like they've been given something that you could maybe do something with. I mean, I don't want to overblow it, but it's like, look what happened with the Montreal Screwjob, right? I'm not saying this is that again, but look what they did. They took the real heat. Wow, people hate Vince McMahon for real because of what he did and this whole thing, and people are interested in the behind the scenes. Let's make it a storyline, and it turned out into the greatest thing of all time. I think that's what they're thinking, and I don't know if they could actually execute on it.
What's the payoff? Is it now Omega? And I don't think he's coming back anytime soon. So it certainly made me want to see Kenny Omega versus whoever, the Bucks or whatever. But short of that, I'm not sure where this is going. Is Swerve getting inserted in this storyline at some point, and he's sort of like defending the honor of AEW?
But I know why they did that too, because my immediate reaction after that show, which I thought was a mess of a show, when they shot the angle with Tony Khan, and you had Swerve for some unknown reason just wrestling Kyle Fletcher in the second segment in a non-title match. It was a weird show. And I know one of the criticisms was, you've got this historic moment. It's the first Black AEW World Champion. Not only that, he's very over. The fans love him. Not only do you kind of just bury him in the middle of the show, but the show doesn't feel in any way like it's built around him.
No.
He's the new champion. I'm not saying you got to do the WWE 20-minute promo at the beginning of the show, but do something to make it feel like this show is built around this guy. You do your biggest angle right at the end of the show, has nothing to do with him whatsoever. And I think that they were responding to that and saying, okay, we have to rope him into this somehow, because we don't want to minimize him. I think that's a good instinct to have. It's just, how do you execute it? That's all.
Yeah, and I don't know who they are. I mean, now they've announced his Double or Nothing opponent, and it's Christian Cage, which feels sort of like out of the
very random. And it was like the epitome of just like, and here's who you're going to wrestle. I just picked him off the top of my head, and he's going to come out and attack you for no reason because you guys had a tag team match 4 years ago. That's how they do it, I guess.
And there's been this groundswell for Swerve for a while, and they finally put the title on him, and it feels like, I don't want to overstate things, but certainly not since like maybe Hangman Page does it feel like the title has meant less. It's not the center.
I don't know. That's going very far. I mean, I don't know.
Not out of anything that Swerve is doing, but
Right.
you just touched on it is not the centerpiece of the show. I mean,
Yeah, no, that's true. I can't deny that.
About the EVPs and the Bucks and Perry and like you said, he's fighting, whatever the opponent of the week in the mid card, and now Christian Cage in a match that I wouldn't be surprised if it's not featured as the main event on that show. Alfonso, I'm sorry, I don't want to leave you out of this conversation. What do you think of just kind of generally this presentation, the stuff with the EVPs and the Bucks, Swerve, kind of the latest coat of paint on AEW and how it's getting over?
Well, I do agree that the whole EVP angle is just not working flat out. But yeah, like Brian said, trying to stay on the positive side. I think one of the payoffs may be, especially with the Kenny attack last week, it gave me the feeling that they may be building towards Kenny versus Okada, and anything that leads to that match, it's gonna be a winner. But yeah, I definitely see the problem with Swerve, and I think the bigger problem with him is that I personally can't think of a way of making him, the top guy. I can't think of a guy he can wrestle that would make him bigger than the EVP stories, or I don't see a challenger for him with a backstory or with the motivation to run a month's length feud with Swerve. I think that's the real issue with him as a champ.
Well, I mean, there's no shortage of stars in AEW, right? I mean,
Yeah, sure.
it's a matter of putting some focus. Imagine if it was, and I'm not saying go to this right now, but they've got John Moxley and they've got Okada, they've got Chris Jericho. These are stars. These are big stars, and you could bide your time. You don't have to go right out of the gate with like these huge money main events. But I do think, in part because I think they got a little bit of the timing on Swerve wrong, right? I mean, you think back to the show we were at, Brian, in Long Island in December, and how hot Swerve was coming out of that, and then they put the title on Joe, and Joe had like a fine title reign for a few months, and all the time Swerve was kind of cooling off, and then they put the title on him. I feel like they missed that window, and now Swerve is, among a certain segment of fans, I think he's really appreciated. I don't think he's as hot as he was some months ago, so I think they missed that window, so it's now kind of rebuilding. But something that Alfonso mentioned that I almost like forgot is Okada. It is crazy that Okada is part of this storyline, and it's like, oh yeah, he's there too. A guy who they are paying, I'm sure, a ton of money. One of the biggest free agent signings in the history of AEW, and he is now a member of an act with like at least four guys, and kind of like the quiet guy in the group, right? With Perry and now the Bucks. It is what do they call it? It's a promotional malpractice.
They had him he beat some guy a couple of weeks ago. I didn't even know who the guy was, and I watch all these shows. I was like, what are they doing with this guy? But I think with this first thing, with the Swerve thing, I mean, I could kind of, again, I see what they're trying to do. They're doing the heel authority figures, right? They're trying to put Swerve through the ringer. Like, it's that old WWE thing that everybody got sick of because they did it for so long. We're going to put this top baby face through the gauntlet. You're going to have to overcome all these things. And then I guess it would make sense to have him, if you really he's your top champion and he's defending the company, he's got to wrestle Jack Perry. And then the question becomes like, I could kind of see him losing that, which is then raises the question, why did they even do this in the first place, other than make him a transitional champion, which is kind of weird. But the Okada thing is a head scratcher. It ties into the Mercedes Moné thing.
Let's talk about. I mean, Mercedes, it's like
plummeting like a stone, and it makes you realize sometimes I feel like it exposes some of these talents because it just shows you how important promotion is, marketing is, presentation is, because I think it's way too dismissive and generalizing when people say that wrestlers are interchangeable and all that matters is the promotion, and you could, because it's not a competitive sport, you can take anybody and make them a star. I think that is not fair to say and not true, but it's partly true. Like you can. There is a big part that those things play that are not a part of other sports as much, because in boxing you can just knock a whole bunch of people out and you're going to be a big star. In baseball, you get a lot of home runs, you're going to be a big star. You make a lot of touchdowns, people are going to talk about you. In wrestling, you're dependent on how people present you. And Okada you're talking about the biggest Japanese wrestling star of this century, without question.
Yeah.
And he just is wallpaper in AEW. And Mercedes Moné,
less than him, I would say. Yeah.
What would you say?
Less than him, less than Okada.
Yes, no, absolutely. And not only that, but I'm not, I would say the same, a male wrestler, a female wrestler. I want to be very clear. This is not meant to be one of those, like when you hear people on podcasts say, well, this girl's not hot or whatever. I'm not saying that, but even her visual presentation is not as good as it was in WWE. And I felt this way, for example, about a lot of guys that jumped to WCW during the Monday Night Wars. Even when WCW was hot, you would see that they looked like crap compared to when they were in WWE, because they didn't have this machine of makeup and hair and costuming and the creative services department that WWE has. I'm seeing that here too, where it's like she doesn't even have that star aura in the way she appears anymore that she had when she was in WWE.
And it's a little counterintuitive because she's got so much on, right? I mean, like, I feel like she's trying so hard. Can you have any more like accessories on, and the designs and her hair and all that stuff? And if anything, I think it's part of the problem that she is focusing so much on image, and there's no substance there. I mean, it doesn't help that she's in the company, 2 months now and hasn't wrestled a match, which is her calling card. I mean, she was a fine promo in WWE, and I think at her best was such a total package in WWE. I mean, really, the presentation was spot on there, but it was always her ring work, which was really her calling card, and we haven't seen any of it. And I get, like, make them wait, that kind of thing, but the appearances, the promos have been, I mean, there's no way to say they've been bad. Her promos have not been good. It is. You would not think that this was a performer who had developed the reputation as one of the best performers. I wouldn't even say female performers, but just, a WrestleMania headliner. Her work, her presentation on the mic is like, I don't want to overstate it, but it is green. It is not polished. You
could see that she was definitely somebody who benefited very much from having people craft everything that she had to say. Not everybody can swing it, either ad-libbing or coming up with their own material or having input. Some people really need that. And I think, the other thing, which I think they're realizing now, I don't even know, but is who in the world thought that the way she's been packaged and presented and the types of promos she's been cutting, who thought that this person was going to be a babyface? How in the world? She is the most heelish character you could ever imagine. She calls herself the CEO. Like, who likes CEOs? All she talks about is money. I mean, that's what heels do. And just the way that she interacts with the other wrestlers is very heelish. And in the beginning, I think that was not intended. Now I think they're finally, maybe with this Willow Nightingale thing, like leaning into it and saying, okay, she's a heel, let's make her a heel. But it just seems like all just chaotic.
Yeah. Alfonso, what do you think of the presentation of Mercedes so far?
I think it's a really big issue that goes beyond Mercedes. I think you're seeing a little bit of that with Will Ospreay and, well, we just mentioned Okada, that they're like the three biggest free agents in the world, basically. And I also think that the fact that WWE does the exact opposite. Like, I wouldn't like to point anybody out, well, to single anybody out, but this last week, the women's tag title match in France, I felt like Jade Cargill looked a little lost, a little, yeah,
No
I don't know.
question. No question.
She looked weird on the ring, in the ring, I should say, and that's literally the flip side of Mercedes. Jade Cargill is so elevated by her presentation and her like yeah, like her program. Everything she does goes beyond the ring, and it's literally the complete opposite of Mercedes.
Yeah, actually, we didn't talk about that. Do we have time to talk about that? Because I think that match is something worth talking about because Jade Cargill obviously is, and we're talking about the Backlash Women's Tag Team Title match. She's somebody they have huge hopes for. Presentation has been fantastic. That if I am Triple H, whoever, Bruce Pritchard, Michael Hayes, whoever it is, like I'm a little concerned after watching that match, to be honest with you, because there's only so much smoke and mirrors that you can do. Eventually, somebody's got to produce. And look, I have no doubt she's going to be a big star for them. But that match was troubling, especially for somebody that has had so many people working with her and has been kept off TV for so long. She really did. It was very clumsy. It was the first time we saw her having to sell or be in there for any extended amount of time. And she did, like you said, Alfonso, she seemed lost. She seemed to throw off the rhythm of the match. I think there was a key spot where a lot of people were scratching their head, where I think everybody had literally lost track of who was legal. And the referee was the only one who to his credit, knew and remembered. And it messed everything up. There were points in the match where you could tell she was just kind of standing around and not really knowing what she was supposed to do. And I'm one of those people that says you play to people's strengths. You don't, Goldberg was, they did what they needed to do with him. And the worst thing they ever did with him was having to try to make him have these long competitive matches that exposed him. But I almost feel like, I hate to say this because I'm a big fan of hers, that she was worse in there than him, in the sense of when you really needed something more from him than just a couple of moves. So it's a problem that I think they need to address, because you can't just have her do squashes forever. Like at some point, especially if they want her in that spot where she's like main eventing, or she's the women's champion, like she's got to produce. So I'm wondering if they might be a little nervous after seeing something like that.
I honestly, I don't fully agree. I don't think what you're saying is unfounded. I think this was a completely anticipated issue, and I think they're navigating through it. I think the reality is you've got a woman who is still relatively new, right? What does she have? Does she have 4 years in the business, something like that? Still
4 or 5, maybe. Yeah,
green in the WWE system, less than a year since she started even training. I think she's still a little green. I think they're smart to put her in tag matches where you could cover some of that up, but you can't cover all of it up, and some of it's gonna come through. I think it's to be expected. It's not ideal. I don't think it is like a lost cause. And I think also with somebody like her, to some extent, and I think the Goldberg comparison is a good one, that there is something of a ceiling that, look, she is never going to be, insert great wrestler here. She's never going to be Charlotte Flair. She's never going to be Mercedes in the ring. She has got a skill set, and I think it is tapping into that. You're right; they can't all be squashes. She's got to be good enough that she can work a standard match, and maybe she gets there. I'm not that concerned about it. I mean, there's the aspect of it, like you want to be safe, right? You don't want anybody to get hurt. But I think it is forgivable that some stuff still doesn't look that great.
Well, because the only other alternative you have, if she doesn't progress beyond this, is that she is, rather than being, and I don't think there's even been a character they've ever had like this before, except maybe China, but I don't think China even fits. Instead of being like the world champion, the headliner, the one who has like the epic matches and everything, she would have to be like the special attraction
Andre
woman.
the
Right, like a female, and this is not a flattering comparison, but a female Andre the Giant or a female Undertaker, that kind of thing, where nobody expects, all right, maybe later in his career he would do this MMA stuff or whatever, but nobody was expecting, like, the Undertaker was a moment. You wanted to be there for the presence, to watch him just decimate somebody, annihilate them, come out and just like and you know what I mean? Like, she could be that, but
or even like and better than this, but an Omos, right? Who, like, you get why the guy's got a job, right?
Right.
He's just incredible to look at.
But Omos is like
good enough that he can, he could get through a match, but he serves a purpose. I do wonder whether she could ever be like your touring world champion, right? I think it's what you're getting at. Like, I don't know how she works long singles matches with some of the women they have who are so good. WWE's got really good women wrestlers. You saw Tiffany over the weekend. She's incredible. Tiffany Stratton really is like next level. And I don't know that she ever gets there, but is she, Giant Gonzalez, right? Something like
well, you got to be careful. Well, because Giant Gonzalez and Omos are examples of people where they wanted them to be that, but it has not worked out.
Yeah, that's good.
But like, you don't, because you don't want to expose her. That's the problem. Like, you can't force it, because then if they say, screw it, you're in the main event against Rhea Ripley, like, she is going to be so exposed that then fans will turn on her, and then you've lost her value. So you've got to be, what I'm trying to say is you can't force it. If she can't do it, she can't do it. You got to figure out where she fits in that case.
I think that the tags are probably a good idea for now with somebody like Bianca, such a pro. I don't know if eventually the idea is a split and then you do Bianca and Jade, which could be a money match, but you do wonder, that is exactly sort of like what you are concerned about. You get to, like, what does that look like? Jade and Bianca, if and when they get there. Alfonso, do you have the same concerns about Jade's progression?
Yeah, I kind of do. I do think that kind of like female Brock Lesnar thing could work for her. And to her credit and to WWE's credit, I think she's been put in a position of, in probably the best position she could be, like learning from Bianca and literally touring with her. And well, from what we see on TikTok and Instagram, they're basically together all the time. So I think that gives her the best shot at improving. But based on what we saw at Backlash, it particularly worried me, the fact that she was in there with Kairi Sane and Asuka, which are like two of the most like reliable and safe workers, and in front of, like you said, probably the hottest crowd in WWE history, and she still couldn't manage to get out of whatever was happening in her head. So that was my main concern, that this was like the best opportunity to, I don't know, to show that she has improved, and she didn't. So that's worrying.
It's a good point. You got Kairi, Asuka, and Bianca Belair. You couldn't be surrounded by three better workers in the ring. But I am of the mindset of give her a chance. Not to totally move it back to WWE, but it does remind me of a couple of things that maybe we should touch on before we head out of here. One, the latest sort of turn in the Bloodline story, and I thought we might have been done with Bloodline after WrestleMania, but now we have an entirely new Bloodline. Now we've got the Guerrillas of Destiny reunited with Solo. Clearly something is going on. Paul Heyman seems to be out of the loop. There is all this talk of this is by the order of the tribal chief, but it sounds like nobody's even talking to Roman Reigns. So is Roman even the tribal chief? Brian, what do you make of what's going on? Do you like it? And where do you think it goes? Oh, mute.
It's Bloodline Wolfpack. We're finally there. Like, I'm here for it. I think it's great. Keep it going in a way that is fresh and new. I felt like, there was about a year there where it felt like it was starting to get a little stale there. I think this is the way to go with it. I'm not sure if it'll ever be as hot as it was again, although, this might be one of those things. I was joking with somebody, like when they make the documentary years from now, this will be the part that they just sort of leave out, or they give like a couple of quick minutes about, but I could be very wrong, because there's a lot of potential here when the anticipation of Roman coming back, clearly being babyface, rescuing Heyman from being tortured by these guys, and then you've got Heyman and Paul and Roman Reigns as the most unlikeliest babyface duo ever,
right? Reunited.
But I think that's where we're headed. Paul Heyman is so good, I can't even overstate it. There's not a lot of people in wrestling that you can count on to pull off this type of performance, where it's like he's got to sell this thing where he's still in the bloodline. He's with Solo Sikoa. They could physically kill him at any moment, and he knows it. He's trying to stay on their good side. He's not fully babyface yet, but he's not quite a heel anymore. Like, he's pulling it off. You saw him. He came to Kevin Owens' aid in that match. Basically, he was like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. Let's make sure this guy is okay. And there was a moment where where they confronted Jey Uso. I love this. When they confronted Jey Uso backstage, it was the new bloodline, Solo Sikoa and the Guerrillas of Destiny. I don't know if they're probably not going to call them that, but when they confronted Jey Uso and they all kind of glare at him and walk by, and then Heyman comes into frame and he gives him this look.
Like, help.
Yeah, I can't even describe it. It was the look of, like, it said so much. It basically said, look, I know we've had a lot of water under the bridge. I know you probably don't like me. I'm sorry about this. There's nothing I can do. And by the way, could you please help me?
Yeah.
It was so, in just one look. People could do that. He is so valuable to getting this whole thing over. So, yeah, I mean, they've made it interesting again.
Yeah, they're planting the seeds for what feels like another long-term storyline that will have a satisfying payoff. And you think of all the directions it could go with Roman returning. What's The Rock's involvement? Is The Rock the tribal chief that is giving all the orders? There's now talk of Jacob Fatu joining. So you've got a new look bloodline. And Jimmy's out now. Does Jimmy reunite with Jay? So do you have like the warring bloodlines? It could be really fun. Alfonso, do you get excited about this?
Yeah, they're making it difficult not to get excited about it. Especially with the fact that Jacob Fatu is most likely WWE bound, and now I can't see how he fits, but I'm really excited to see how, like, what his role is gonna be. If like you mentioned, if he's gonna come in with The Rock, that'd make huge business. I would assume.
Yeah, it feels like a new look, heel bloodline, gone rogue. Heyman can't control them. Roman can't control them. So, and for so long, the goal was that Rock Roman match. And after the false start this year, there was a thought like, well, how do you build interest in that again? It feels like that's sort of dead now. Like, they played that hand and it didn't work. This might be what would actually sort of almost it makes it a big match. And not just because of the marquee value of Rock and Roman, but because they organically tell a really compelling storyline that culminates in those two. I'm here for that. I think
without having either, like, I think, like, the fact that they're if they're building to that match, the fact that they're doing it without either one of them in TV,
yes.
I think that's great. That's incredible.
Yeah. And Solo's doing great work. Solo's is I think really like coming into his own, and has been great since he showed up, but now he's kind of taken it to the next level. Last thing, doesn't have to be a big thing. Jay and Damian Priest went the way we expect to go, but that entrance was just incredible, right? I mean, that was like that alone is reason to watch that pay-per-view, and it's almost the kind of thing that made me think, like, if the plan wasn't to put the world title on Jay, maybe they should call an audible and put the world title on Jay, because that was something else.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's one of those people where I was watching it thinking initially, oh, I feel like maybe they've done as much as they could do with him. Like that WrestleMania match was not good with the brothers. That was really disappointing. And if I were them, I would really feel like I let the company down. I don't mean to overstate it. And I don't necessarily think that's a fair response, but I could see coming away from that match thinking that in your heart, And so I started thinking, well, okay, maybe he's hit the end of the line. But yeah, it's a kind of reaction that makes you realize that there's huge fan support for him. It almost made me think that there was going to be a title change there, that they would do it like you. I don't know if it even would have been an audible. It almost made me think like maybe I'm wrong about this guy. Yeah. Maybe he's got a little bit more than I think. But they did what they needed to do with Damian Priest. It's interesting how they. Now are they trying to make him a separate entity from Judgment Day? I don't know.
Remains it's kind of like what we were just talking about with the bloodline. It looks like maybe something parallel.
Is he turning face? I mean, it really seems to be like, I don't need your help, like that kind of thing. Stop interfering in my matches. I don't know.
Yeah, it does feel like maybe we're coming up on the end of the bloodline, or at least the Judgment Day, at least as we know them. All right, good talk all around. I appreciate it. Alfonso, anything you want to promote? How can people follow you on social media? I know you do some work outside of PWI.
No, not really. I'm not really active in social media. I would just tell people to buy the latest PWI magazine, PWI-online.com, I believe.
Yep. And are you writing for? I looked your stuff up, and I know you've done stuff for other websites and organizations too.
Yeah, I do. I actually write for Wrestling Inc. as well, and I do some social media work for Sportskeeda. So just keep an eye out for my work, I guess.
Yes, you're doing fantastic work. Glad to have you on board at PWI. Brian always got a lot of irons in the fire. What do you want to talk about this week?
Yeah, actually, can I mention my Patreon? I've never talked about it on here before, because like Twitter will just bury any tweet where you mention Patreon. So it's always good to have a different outlet. No, but I've started something that is sort of connected to my podcast, Shut Up and Wrestle. It's something that a lot of people were asking me to do. It just became a thing. So I've started doing it where I record these audio commentaries, like watch along commentaries to go along with classic wrestling shows. So like you can queue it up on Peacock or whatever, and then hit the commentary. And it's me basically giving background and history on some historic wrestling event. And I just started doing it with a free sample on the Shut Up and Wrestle Patreon, which is patreon.com/shutupandwrestle. And people can suggest shows they might want me to do. I'm going to start doing them for subscribers very soon. So it's just something that I'm trying to get off the ground now. I'm probably going to do about one of these a month or maybe two, see how it goes, see what the demand is.
Because you got so much time on your hands.
Oh, yeah. All the time I can handle. I'm adding hours to the day. No, it's not going to be something that dominates my time. Like I said, if I sit down for an hour or two a month and record one of these things, that's kind of like my goal. I just did one as a free sample for an old Madison Square Garden WWF show from the 70s, just to give people an idea of what it sounds like to have me walking you through a classic wrestling event. But I'll do WrestleManias. I'll do whatever people want me to do, just kind of like, commenting on the show as a watch along thing.
Yeah, great. Sounds fun. This is completely out of the blue, but this makes me think. Last night I found the coolest thing on YouTube, but it was like a camcorder shot house show from like a Wisconsin field house, a WWF house show from 1990, and just so incredible because like you'd watch, WWF television back then, and they'd have, remember the little graphic on primetime where the plane flies over, and then they would run all the dates, and there was like, obviously the A shows, the Garden or what have you, but then there was these like tiny little venues, and I would always wonder like, what the hell does that show look like? And this was pretty well shot, like an entire house show from this little rinky-dink field house in Wisconsin, and
it's good to find those videos on YouTube and things. Somebody had one of the best matches I have ever seen, and they never did it on TV. It was essentially an Iron Man match. They called it a marathon match between Bret and Owen Hart.
I've seen that, yeah.
Oh, we've talked about this, right? It was the one at it was Nassau Coliseum, yeah. And this thing, I think it was 90 minutes or something crazy. No, maybe like an hour, a little over an hour. I don't know, because they went into overtime again, if I remember right. And it was insane. It wasn't like the Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels one. There were multiple. It wasn't like that they had no decisions by the hour. It's that they were tied at the hour. And that's why they had to, if I remember it right, and that's why they had to go into overtime. And there's a recording of it, camcorder on YouTube. Incredible match.
It's so crazy when I find those, because you think what that entails. You know what camcorders looked like back then?
I know. And not only that, but you weren't supposed to have them at those shows.
I don't know how you get them. My parents had one back then, and it came in this giant briefcase, right? I mean, it was like
on your shoulder.
Yeah. I mean, this thing was like, so how do you sneak one of those in? They're like dressing up like a baby or something. But yeah, those are gold. Thank God for YouTube. All right, guys, thank you so much for doing this. We'll do it again soon. Alfonso, thanks very much. We'll get you back on. Brian, as always, a pleasure, and we'll see you all again soon.